State of Decay 2, a game audiobook. Chapter 1, A Fractured World. The world had descended into chaos. Trumbull Valley, once a picturesque haven, now lay in ruins. The air was heavy with the acrid stench of decay, and the haunting moans of the undead echoed through the desolate landscape. The zombie virus had swept through the region like an unstoppable tide, leaving only remnants of what had once been a thriving community. In the midst of this devastation, two figures found themselves huddled in the shelter of an abandoned farmhouse. Maya, a resourceful former nurse with a steely resolve, and Marcus, a strong-willed soldier who'd witnessed the downfall of civilization, shared the burden of survival. They had been on the road, searching for safety, supplies, and any semblance of a life before the world had unraveled. Now, with the dimming light of day, they had to confront the bitter reality that their search had led them to this forsaken place. The old farmhouse offered a modicum of protection. Its weathered wooden walls bore the scars of time, yet they held fast against the relentless undead. They had fortified the windows with wooden planks, creating a barrier that separated them from the horrors outside. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, the silence broken only by the distant groans of the infected. Marcus slung his backpack onto a rickety table, and the meager supplies they'd managed to scavenge spilled out. Canned food, bottled water, a few medical supplies, these were the remnants of the world they had lost. Maya sat down, exhaustion etched into her features, and Marcus leaned against the wall, his eyes scanning the room, taking in the grim reality. The soft flicker of a lantern cast long, wavering shadows, painting an eerie picture on the walls. Their faces, partially concealed by grime and the traces of grief, revealed the harsh toll the world had exacted. "Marcus, we can't stay here forever," Maya finally spoke, her voice heavy with the weight of their predicament. "We need a plan." He nodded, knowing she was right. The farmhouse could provide only temporary respite. With each passing day, their dwindling supplies, and the ever-present threat of the undead made it clear that they needed a more sustainable solution. Their plan took shape slowly, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. They would need to explore the nearby town, scavenge for resources, and perhaps find a group of survivors who could offer some semblance of safety. They agreed that, above all else, they needed to be cautious, for the valley was a dangerous place, teeming with both the living and the dead who might do them harm. As they discussed their strategy in hushed tones, the world outside grew darker, the night sky punctuated by the distant glow of fires and the flickering lantern light. The first chapter of their story was written, a testament to their determination to survive in this fractured world. Maya and Marcus knew that the path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, but in their eyes, a spark of resilience still burned. They would face the horrors of the Trumbull Valley together, confronting the fractured world with unwavering determination. Chapter 2, A Gathering Storm. The following morning dawned with an eerie stillness, the pale light of day seeping through the cracked windows of the farmhouse. Maya and Marcus knew they couldn't stay holed up for long, and with their supplies dwindling, they decided to venture into the nearby town. The streets were a haunting mosaic of destruction. Abandoned cars clogged the roads, and shattered windows bore witness to the desperate last moments of the living. The town had once been a place of community, but now it was overrun by the walking dead. Maya and Marcus moved in tandem, their every step marked by caution and their senses on high alert. The occasional groans of the undead served as a macabre soundtrack to their exploration. The duo scoured each building, searching for supplies, weapons, and anything that might aid their survival. They found canned food, bandages, and even a rusty pipe that Marcus turned into a makeshift weapon. As they reached the center of town, They came across a tattered bulletin board covered in faded posters. One poster caught Maya's eye, a faded picture of a missing person, dated from the early days of the outbreak. It was a stark reminder of how quickly the world had crumbled. Further exploration led them to a group of survivors holed up in a former pharmacy. The enclave was called the Wilkersons, and they were known throughout the valley for their surly nature and fierce independence. The group consisted of rugged individuals, each with a story etched in the lines of their faces. Approaching cautiously, Maya and Marcus introduced themselves. The leader of the Wilkersons, a grizzled man named Eli, eyed them suspiciously but allowed them to speak. The conversation was terse, filled with pointed questions about their skills and intentions. "We don't take kindly to strangers," Eli grumbled, his arms crossed. "We've been burned before." Maya and Marcus explained their predicament and their search for a safe haven. They offered to help gather supplies and aid in any way they could. Slowly, the ice began to thaw, and the Wilkersons realized that, in this fractured world, it might be wiser to forge alliances than to remain isolated. The Wilkersons had information about other survivor enclaves in the valley, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Some were welcoming, while others were hostile to newcomers. Trumbull Valley was a patchwork of communities, each struggling to survive, and trust was a rare commodity. Leaving the Wilkersons' enclave with an understanding, Maya and Marcus returned to their farmhouse. The existence of these survivor enclaves and the varying attitudes they encountered only emphasized the complex nature of this new world. The survivors of the valley remained skeptical of newcomers, and Maya and Marcus knew they had to navigate these treacherous waters carefully. As they rested in the fading light of the day, Maya turned to Marcus, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "We're not alone in this, Marcus," she said. "But the world out there is a gathering storm, and we need to find our place in it." And so, their journey continued, with the knowledge that the fractured world held both allies and adversaries, and the decisions they made would shape their fate in Trumbull Valley. Chapter 3: Building Hope. The farmhouse had become their sanctuary, a fragile bubble of safety in the sea of danger. Maya and Marcus had returned from their excursion, bearing supplies and stories of the outside world. Their newfound alliance with the Wilkersons had brought a measure of security, but they knew it wouldn't be enough to ensure their long-term survival. With their meager supplies spread across the table, the survivors began the painstaking process of assessing their resources. Maya, with her medical knowledge, carefully examined the bandages and painkillers they had acquired. Marcus sharpened his makeshift weapon and double-checked their meager food supply. Their fellow survivors gathered around, casting worried glances at the window barricades and the lurking uncertainty outside. The group was a motley crew of individuals from different walks of life, bound together by circumstance and a shared desire to stay alive. Sam, the resourceful mechanic, had a knack for jury-rigging machinery and set to work on repairing a broken generator. Lily, the young woman with a talent for communication, tried to establish contact with other survivors over a hand-cranked radio. Amid the hustle and bustle of survivors tending to their assigned tasks, Maya and Marcus found a moment to sit together. The farmhouse's interior was now lined with empty bottles of water, rows of canned goods, and a small makeshift garden in the backyard. They had transformed it into something more than just shelter. It was becoming a home. "We can't stay static," Maya whispered, her eyes locked on the garden, a glimmer of hope in her gaze. "We need to build something more permanent, something that can withstand whatever's out there." Marcus nodded in agreement. Their survival depended on creating a community, a safe haven where skills were shared, and people looked out for one another. It was clear that they needed to fortify their defenses, construct sleeping quarters, establish a medical area, and find a sustainable source of food and water. As days turned into weeks, the survivors worked tirelessly, transforming the farmhouse into a makeshift stronghold. Wooden planks reinforced the windows, and scavenged materials were used to construct a basic workshop. A small garden, though modest, yielded fresh vegetables, and a rain barrel collected precious rainwater. The survivors began to form bonds, their shared struggles forging a sense of unity. Their community began to develop its own rhythm. A watchtower was constructed on the farmhouse roof, offering a vantage point to spot approaching danger. The survivors took turns guarding the base and going on resource gathering expeditions. An improvised medical area was set up, and Maya took on the role of healer, tending to minor wounds and illnesses. Despite the hardships, there was a glimmer of optimism. The survivors no longer felt like solitary wanderers in a hostile world. They had become a family. As the first tendrils of green broke through the cracks in the world outside, the farmhouse too began to blossom with the seeds of hope. The survivors were building more than just defenses. They were building a place where humanity could endure. However, a shadow lingered over their newfound stability. The fractured world still held many secrets, and the survivors knew they had merely scratched the surface. Unanswered questions about the outbreak, the virus, and the mysteries of Trumbull Valley loomed, reminding them that their journey was far from over. Maya and Marcus watched the sun dip below the horizon, their faces etched with determination. They knew that the road ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but in the midst of the apocalypse, they were building something precious, an island of hope in a world overrun by despair. Chapter 4: A Desperate Rescue. Life at the farmhouse was gradually improving. The survivors had constructed a relatively secure base, cultivating a semblance of normality in the midst of the apocalypse. They had learned to forage for food and purify water, adapting to their new world. Yet, the specter of danger still lurked beyond the safety of their barricaded walls. Maya and Marcus had embarked on yet another supply run, this time to an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town. The once bustling station was now an eerie, silent wasteland. The gas pumps lay dormant, and a row of abandoned cars hinted at a hasty evacuation. As they cautiously approached, the air was thick with tension. They moved stealthily, using their improvised weapons to silently dispatch any nearby zombies. The supply run was going as planned, with cans of gasoline and a few valuable medical supplies in their hands. But then, they heard a desperate cry for help. The voice was faint, barely audible over the shuffle of the undead. They followed the sound to a nearby tool shed, hidden behind the gas station. Inside, they found Ed, a trapped survivor. He had taken refuge there, but was now surrounded by the undead, trapped and defenseless. Maya and Marcus shared a glance, and without a word, they knew what they had to do. They couldn't leave a fellow survivor behind. Together, they fought their way through the relentless horde, drawing the attention of the zombies away from Ed. The air was filled with the sounds of desperate combat, the sickening thud of weapons meeting undead flesh, and the guttural moans of the infected. The survival instincts they had developed in this harsh world served them well. After what felt like an eternity, they finally cleared a path to the shed, rescuing Ed. He was battered and bruised, but alive. Their fellow survivors' gratitude was evident as they returned to the farmhouse. Ed was more than just a rescued stranger. He was a valuable addition to their community. His medical knowledge was a rare and precious skill in a world where injuries and illnesses could prove fatal. Ed patched up their wounds and tended to their ailments, instilling a newfound sense of security among the survivors. As they sat around the dimly lit table in the farmhouse, their first proper meal as a larger group, Ed shared stories of his life before the outbreak. He had been a paramedic dedicated to saving lives. Now, he could continue to do so in this new, broken world. Maya, who had shouldered the burden of medical care until then, welcomed the support. Ed's arrival was a turning point, a reminder that, despite the horrors of their reality, they could still save lives and hold on to a semblance of humanity. The rescue of Ed had not only brought a skilled healer into their fold, but also served as a testament to the survivors' unwavering commitment to one another. As they settled down for the night, the farmhouse was filled with a renewed sense of hope, knowing that they were not alone and that, together, they could overcome the desperate challenges of the world outside. Chapter 5: Uncovering Secrets. The presence of Ed, the paramedic turned survivor, had rejuvenated the farmhouse community. His medical skills provided the survivors with a newfound sense of security, and the sense of unity grew stronger with each passing day. Yet, amid the ongoing struggle for survival, a shadow of uncertainty loomed. The survivors couldn't escape the feeling that there were hidden truths waiting to be uncovered in the depths of Trumbull Valley. Ed's arrival marked a turning point. As he gained the trust of the group, he revealed a piece of information that ignited a spark of curiosity. He had overheard a rumor from one of the other enclaves in the valley, a whisper about a hidden military camp, a place that might hold answers to the questions that plagued their community. The survivors gathered around, their faces reflecting a mixture of hope and trepidation. Marcus, who had a soldier's intuition, recognized the potential significance of such a discovery. "We need to investigate this military camp," he said, the weight of responsibility heavy in his voice. "It could have information that might help us understand what happened here." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, the group set out towards the rumored military camp. The journey was fraught with danger as they navigated the treacherous terrain, moving quietly to avoid drawing the attention of the undead. Their destination was a former military facility, shrouded in an aura of secrecy. The barbed wire fences and watchtowers suggested that this place had once been a well-guarded outpost, but now it stood abandoned and overrun by nature. Inside the facility, the survivors discovered a trove of information. A dusty office contained files, documents, and logs that hinted at a sinister corporate entity known as ZTech. The files revealed that ZTech had been involved in clandestine experiments, potentially linked to the outbreak. As they delved deeper, they unearthed research papers that mentioned a potential cure hidden within the valley, a cure that could reverse the effects of the virus and save what was left of humanity. The implications were staggering, as it meant that the key to their survival might lie hidden in the very place they called home. Maya's eyes widened as she skimmed through the research, her medical background allowing her to grasp the significance of the findings. This could change everything," she murmured. But alongside this newfound hope was the realization that ZTech's secrets were still buried deep within the valley. The survivors knew that finding the cure would be an arduous journey, filled with danger and uncertainty. Yet, with this information, their quest had newfound purpose. They returned to the farmhouse, each step heavy with the weight of what they had uncovered. Their world had irrevocably changed, and the pursuit of answers and the potential for a cure had become the driving force of their existence. Chapter 6: Power Struggles. The survivors returned to the farmhouse with the knowledge of ZTech's involvement in the outbreak had an unexpected consequence: increased influence and growing tensions in Trumbull Valley. As word of their discoveries spread, the community began to attract the attention of other survivor enclaves, including the Wilkersons, who had become their uneasy allies. The Wilkersons had initially been distrustful of Maya, Marcus, and the others. Their survival had always been based on self-sufficiency, and alliances were not something they entered into lightly. But now, The community at the farmhouse had valuable information and resources, and the dynamic in the valley was shifting. A power struggle began to brew. Eli Wilkerson, the gruff leader of the Wilkersons, saw the potential benefits of having the knowledge and skills of the farmhouse community at their disposal. However, he was unwilling to relinquish control, setting the stage for a conflict that had been building ever since their uneasy alliance was formed. The other enclaves in the valley also took notice. Some saw the growing community as a potential threat, while others recognized the strength in numbers. Alliances had to be forged, and old enmities put aside as the survivors navigated the delicate politics of the post-apocalyptic world. At the farmhouse, Maya, Marcus, and the other survivors were aware of the shifting dynamics. They held a meeting, discussing the pros and cons of aligning with the Wilkersons or going their own way. There were passionate arguments on both sides. Some believed that unity with the Wilkersons was the key to survival, while others thought that self-sufficiency was the only path forward. In the end, a compromise was reached. They would continue to work together with the Wilkersons, but the alliance would be one of equals. The survivors at the farmhouse had something the Wilkersons needed, and in return, the Wilkersons would provide protection and support. The power struggle did not dissipate entirely, but it shifted from open conflict to a tense coexistence. The valley's enclaves watched one another warily, alliances formed and dissolved, and a delicate balance was maintained as everyone realized that unity might be the only way to confront the bigger threats lurking outside their walls. As the survivors settled into this new arrangement, they understood that power struggles were an intrinsic part of this fractured world. They had to navigate the complexities of human nature while also focusing on their larger mission: to uncover the secrets of Zedtech and find the potential cure for the outbreak that had turned their world into a nightmare. Chapter 7: A Dark Alliance. As the days turned into weeks, the delicate balance of power within Trumbull Valley became more precarious. The alliance with the Wilkersons had been forged out of necessity, a union born from the recognition that strength lay in numbers. Together, they'd fended off hordes of undead and faced the challenges of the post-apocalyptic world side by side. Yet, the alliance was far from ideal, and the tension simmered beneath the surface. The survivors at the farmhouse had been living on borrowed time, relying on the resources they gathered and the meager supplies they'd managed to forage. They needed more, and they needed it urgently. The idea of a desperate raid was proposed. Eli Wilkerson saw the merits of such an operation, an opportunity to replenish their dwindling supplies. The target was a rival enclave that had stockpiled valuable resources. Together with the Wilkersons, the survivors would launch a covert operation to secure those supplies, ensuring their community's survival. But this choice came at a price: the further deterioration of relations with neighboring survivors. The raid began under the cover of night, with Maya, Marcus, and Eli leading the charge. They moved stealthily, with hushed breaths and pounding hearts, aware that they were stepping into dangerous territory. The rivalry with the rival enclave had already been tenuous, and the act of raiding them would undoubtedly tip the scales towards hostility. Their target was a walled compound, home to a group of survivors who had long held a grudge against the farmhouse community. The survivors were ready, armed and poised to defend their resources. What followed was a tense, nerve-wracking standoff, with survivors on both sides holding their breath, fingers on triggers. The raid was a success, albeit a grim one. The survivors managed to secure a cache of vital supplies, but not without a heavy cost: the deterioration of already fragile relations. The rival enclaves saw the act as an act of aggression, and the valley became even more divided. Returning to the farmhouse, the survivors knew they had crossed a dangerous threshold. Their alliance with the Wilkersons had secured them resources, but it had also strained their relationships with neighboring enclaves. They had made a dark choice, one that had far-reaching consequences. The unease that had simmered beneath the surface now threatened to boil over. As they settled back into the farmhouse, they knew that they were on a precarious path, one where the pursuit of survival was laden with moral dilemmas and harsh decisions. In this fractured world, alliances were a double-edged sword, and the survivors were left to grapple with the consequences of their actions. Chapter 8: Betrayal. Tensions had been escalating within the alliance between the survivors at the farmhouse and the Wilkersons. The raid on the rival enclave had not only strained relations with the neighboring survivors, but also sowed seeds of distrust among those who had previously stood side by side. As the days turned into months, the balance of power had tipped further in favor of the Wilkersons. Their grip on the alliance grew tighter, and a sense of unease had settled over the farmhouse community. The Wilkersons, emboldened by their control of critical resources, began to press their advantage. It began with subtle shifts, decisions made without consulting the survivors at the farmhouse, access to vital supplies being restricted, and an increasing sense of dominance within the alliance. Marcus, Maya, and the others realized that their hard-won autonomy was slipping away, and the uneasy truce had become a ticking time bomb. The breaking point came on a particularly fraught evening when Eli Wilkerson, flanked by his loyal followers, declared that he was taking over control of the farmhouse. He justified his actions by arguing that the Wilkersons had the strength and resources to secure the community's survival. Maya and Marcus were unwilling to submit to such an arrangement. The farmhouse had become more than just a base. It was their home, a symbol of hope and resilience. A heated confrontation ensued, with harsh words escalating into a violent clash. Fists were raised, weapons drawn, and the air was filled with shouting and the sound of combat. The survivors fought for their autonomy, unwilling to surrender to the Wilkersons' control. It was a brutal and unforgiving battle. Friends turned against friends, allies now foes. The darkness of the night was illuminated by the angry flames of defiance and the desperate resolve of those who refused to bend to the Wilkersons' will. As dawn broke, the outcome of the confrontation was clear. The survivors at the farmhouse had managed to repel the Wilkersons' attempt to seize control. The price had been high, with wounded and bruised bodies strewn throughout the base. But the conflict had left scars that went beyond physical injuries. The alliance had shattered into irreparable fragments. The Wilkersons retreated, nursing their wounds, and the survivors at the farmhouse realized that they were now alone in the valley, cut off from the few allies they had once had. Chapter 9: The Final Stand. The fallout from the confrontation with the Wilkersons had left the survivors at the farmhouse battered and isolated. The decision to defend their autonomy had not only fractured their last alliance, but also attracted the attention of a far more relentless and indiscriminate force, the valley's zombie horde. Word had spread like wildfire. The gunshots, screams, and chaos from the violent showdown with the Wilkersons had echoed through the valley, and the horde, always hungry for fresh flesh, began to converge on the farmhouse. The survivors at the farmhouse, now cut off from the outside world, watched in grim silence as the relentless tide of undead approached. Wooden barricades, hastily erected watchtowers, and walls hastily fortified with scavenged materials would have to hold the line. Maya, Marcus, and the others knew that this would be their final stand. The farmhouse, once a symbol of hope and resilience, had become a fortress against the impending onslaught. The air was thick with tension, every heartbeat echoing the magnitude of the threat that loomed on the horizon. They moved with a grim determination, final preparations being made. Guns were loaded, melee weapons sharpened, and every available survivor stationed at their posts. The survivors had fought their way through countless skirmishes, but this would be different. This would be a battle for their very survival, where retreat was not an option. As the first wave of the horde descended upon the farmhouse, the survivors unleashed a relentless barrage of gunfire and violence. The air was filled with the thunderous echoes of bullets and the sickening thud of weapons connecting with rotting flesh. Yet, the undead kept coming, their moans and wails a dissonant chorus of despair. The battle raged on, the survivors fighting with a fervor born of desperation. Lives were at stake, and they were determined to protect the sanctuary they had fought so hard to build. Each survivor had a role to play, each moment a testament to their resilience. In the midst of the chaos, Maya stood in the heart of the battle, tending to the wounded, her medical skills stretched to the limit. Marcus was a relentless force, a beacon of hope and determination in the thick of the fight. The others fought with unwavering courage, their eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and resolve. As the hours passed, the horde showed no sign of abating. The battle had become a war of attrition, where survival meant standing your ground against an unstoppable force. The farmhouse's defenses held, but the survivors' endurance was waning. In the darkest hours of the night, when it seemed that all hope was lost, the horde began to thin, the undead finally falling back, their insatiable hunger temporarily sated. The survivors, battered and bruised, remained standing, their faces etched with exhaustion. The final stand had been made, but the cost was high. The farmhouse, though still standing, bore the scars of the battle. The survivors had withstood the relentless onslaught, their will to survive unbroken. Chapter 10: A Glimmer of Hope. The farmhouse stood as a solitary beacon of hope in the aftermath of the brutal battle against the relentless zombie horde. The survivors had emerged victorious but severely battered, their determination and resilience tested to the limits. The once tranquil valley had become a place of danger, secrets, and constant struggle. As the sun broke over the horizon, casting its pale light on the battle-scarred farmhouse, the survivors took a moment to reflect. The cost of their victory was evident in the injuries they bore, and the grim reality that resources were running low. The farmhouse, once a symbol of security and sanctuary, was now a tattered fortress surrounded by the remnants of the undead horde. Maya and Marcus met by the damaged wall, their faces etched with weariness. The valley's mysteries still loomed over them, and the knowledge of Zedteka's involvement in the outbreak was a heavy burden. The potential cure that had become their elusive hope seemed farther away than ever. "We can't stay here forever," Marcus said, his voice tinged with concern. "We've managed to survive this long, but we can't ignore the fact that our resources are dwindling, and the world outside still holds so many secrets." Maya nodded, her thoughts echoing his. The survivors had come a long way from the first day they had arrived in the valley, determined to survive and find answers. They had faced hardships, betrayal, and the relentless onslaught of the undead, but the mysteries of the valley were far from resolved. The survivors gathered in the damaged common area, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of their experiences. The farmhouse, though battle-scarred, remained a symbol of their resilience and determination, but it was clear that they needed a new plan. Their next move was a topic of fervent discussion. Some believed they should search for new allies, others proposed launching expeditions to gather supplies and uncover more information about Zedtek, and some advocated for leaving the valley in search of safer havens. The survivors realized that they were at a crossroads. The fractured world outside held challenges they had yet to face, but it also held the promise of answers and the potential for a cure. Their unity had been tested and found unwavering, but their future remained uncertain. As the survivors planned their next move, they knew that they were in this together, bound by their shared experiences and the determination to survive and find hope in a world that had been fractured beyond recognition. Hey there, fellow fiction enthusiasts. I hope you've been enjoying the audio stories on Muted Gamer Fiction as much as I've loved bringing them to you. Your support means the world to me, and today, I've got a small request for you. If you've been relishing these audiobooks and fan fiction tales, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button, drop a comment, and, of course, subscribe if you haven't already. Your likes, comments, and subscriptions are like fuel to my storytelling fire, and they keep this channel going strong. I'd also love to hear from you. Whether you've got a particular fan fiction suggestion you're dying to share, or simply want to say hi, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. This channel is a community of like-minded fans, and your input is incredibly valuable. So, thank you once again for being a part of Muted Gamer Fiction. Keep those headphones on, immerse yourself in our stories, and let's continue this exciting journey together. Your support keeps the stories coming, and I can't wait to see what fan fiction ideas you have in mind. Happy listening, and remember to hit those like, comment, and subscribe buttons. See you in the next chapter.